In the last video, I covered the key issues that cause ice types overall to struggle. Overall, ice is an amazing offensive type and a dreadful defensive type. Too many ice types are designed with defensive stats and abilities despite the horrible typing. Recently, Game Freak has actually pumped out fast offensive and fast supportive ice types. That's excellent, but I'd like to propose adjustments to the ice type because it would be nice for ice to have more variety in what it can do. I'd like to note that the focus of this video is to make having an ice type more viable. The goal isn't to make ice broken. I'm not trying to rebalance the entire type chart in one video either. That's just too big of a topic. So keep in mind that while I will have to bring up other types and their relative strengths, that will only be in relation to ice. Last time, I proposed that we 1. Give ice 2 or 3 more resistances. 2. Remove at least one weakness. 3. Stop designing defensive ice types. The first 2 are real proposals, and the last one is just me complaining and begging for scraps if they decide that ice can never have more resistances. When talking about weaknesses and resistances in Pokémon, it's a careful balancing act. Not all type interactions need to be like fire and water, where water is super effective against fire and water resists fire. Sometimes interactions like the one between normal and steel work just fine. Normal is not effective against steel, and steel is neutral to normal. Steel gets to keep its identity as the type with the most raw resilience, and normal gets to stay the type that is mostly neutral in offense and defense. In the case of the ice type, I believe that ice's offense is completely fine. It hits a fair amount of strong types. In addition, purely buffing what ice moves hit super effectively just nerfs the other types in exchange for buffing anything that learns ice moves. For example, if you make Fairy and Water weak to ice type attacks, does that really incentivize people to actually use ice types over other Pokemon that learn ice type moves? If anything, water types would now just run Ice Beam to cover opposing water types in addition to grass types. Within the ice type, this only widens the gap between offensive and defensive ice types. Defensive ice types are the ones failing right now, so they need to be brought up. Why are defensive ice types failing right now? They can't switch in. How do we help them switch in? We give them resistances. Now that we've established that the main goal should be giving resistances, the next step is selecting resistances that strengthen ice reasonably without unreasonably nerfing other bad types. This is the reason that I do not wish to make ice resist bug. It would make thematic sense since many arthropods, insects, and bug-like creatures tend to avoid extreme heat and extreme cold. However, bug type does not need that kind of nerf. Besides, bug isn't a valuable type to resist, since so much already resists bug. I have a similar stance with grass because in a sense, bug and grass are sister types that struggle to hit a lot of types but manage to get a lot of weird technical abilities and exclusive moves to help them out. If grass and bug were reworked, I'd certainly be open to looking at their interactions with ice. First up, ice should resist electric, but ice moves will remain neutral on electric. The reasoning is simple, and I'll generalize a bit because not everyone wants to be a physicist. Cold is actually the absence of heat energy, not the presence of cold energy. If you have heat energy, there is heat and it feels hot. If you take away heat energy, there is no heat energy and it feels cold. When there isn't much heat energy, the molecules have less energy to move. Since electricity is a form of energy moving across charged molecules, a really cold object with low heat energy will be a worse conductor. Since this is fantasy ice, we can say that ice types have the ability to make heat energy disappear. Thus, ice resists electric because ice is a terrible conductor of electricity. That's the thematic and logical reason that I believe in that change. Looking at the side of game mechanics and balance, ice is a pretty good type. It's an overall balanced type that hits most types neutrally, and if they have access to an ice move, they can hit everything else their electric moves can't. By the way, this concept of using electric and ice coverage to hit every type at least neutrally is often called Bolt Beam. Offensively, you'd see electric types use moves like Ice Punch or Hidden Power Ice to achieve Bolt Beam coverage. Defensively, electric types only have a weakness to ground, and 3 resistances. Ignoring stats for a moment, the identity of electric is to hit most things, but to have serious trouble with ground. Ice resisting electric would be a slight nerf to electric neutral coverage, but it balances out since electric isn't, and shouldn't be, getting a weakness to ice. This change also nerfs the perfect coverage of Bolt Beam, making Ice the only type to resist Bolt Beam, which would be a good niche for actually using an Ice type specifically for defense. Next is the Ground type. Ice is already super effective on ground, but Ice should also resist ground. Ground is a type that is great offensively. Ground hits 5 types super effectively, and most other types neutrally. They can't hit bug, grass, or flying well, but have rock coverage and the rest of their team to help. Ground already has the trend of being an extremely versatile hard hitter, so being one of the rare types to resist it is valuable. Bug and grass are relatively weak types that get value out of their ground resist, especially with some dual typings. It is for these reasons that Ice should resist ground. Oh right, the thematic reasons. Snow covers the ground and permafrost can last for years in the soil. Now let's get the most contentious one out of the way. I propose the final resistance added should be water. Pokemon fans have argued about the relation between ice and water for the last 27 years. Some people argue that these types should be consolidated into one, since ice and water are the same element. Plenty of RPGs like Genshin Impact, Final Fantasy, Bravely Default, and Octopath Traveler do that thing where ice and water are the same element. Avatar: The Last Airbender, Naruto, and Demon Slayer are all animated examples of how elements can derive from other elements or overlap. Getting back to Pokemon, they should stay separate, since Pokemon don't just manipulate elements, and sometimes are elementals. As for type effectiveness, the decades-old argument goes something like this. Water should actually be weak to ice, because you can just freeze the water. But if you put ice cubes in a glass of water, the ice melts. But if you put that glass of water in the fridge, it freezes. And it goes back and forth forever. Amazingly, this circular argument is the answer. Ice and water can only beat each other by overpowering the other with sheer volume. The logical solution is that water and ice should resist each other. I've always believed that water and ice should stay separate types but be two sides of the same coin. They should resist each other, but not be super effective against each other by default. For balancing purposes, I believe that this arrangement is effective. Ice gains a high value resistance to a very good type. This is already a huge buff to ice and a slight nerf to water. Ice doesn't need more offense at the moment, so this leaves room for weaker offensive types to gain something to hit super effectively. Some of you may be wondering, what about Dragon and Flying? Well, I'm not changing them. Flying is a balanced type right now. Yes, it certainly was a little problematic because of the Aerialate ability in the Generation 6 games, and super problematic because of max Airstream and Sword and Shield. Right now, Flying has 3 super effective hits, 3 not very effective hits, 3 weaknesses, 3 resistances, and 1 immunity. It's in a really good place and doesn't need to be changed. Since Flying is average, it's not that special of a resistance compared to ground, electric, and water. A dragon resistance is certainly way more valuable than Flying, but we already have Fairy as the Dragon Slayer. Ice already has the advantage on a lot of dragons because of the many dual-type dragons quadruple weak to Ice. I want to be conservative with my buffs, so for now Ice shouldn't resist Dragon or Flying. I'm certainly open to these resistances, but not right now. A few types need to be reworked, and I don't want to make Ice too strong considering another buff I'll be giving Ice. That's right, another buff. We're removing one weakness. Fire and Steel are completely off the table, so it's between Fighting and Rock. After a lot of thought, I believe it should be Rock. Overall, it's because I don't believe that Rock has a realistic reason to beat Ice. In the cases that it would make sense, Rock is basically copying other type attributes. For example, people use lava and hard metals as examples of things hot or hard enough to damage Ice. While yes, lava and magma are rock, from the perspective of Pokemon, heat energy manipulation is fire typing. The hard metal excuse doesn't work because steel types exist and claim most metals. Arguably, Ice should be super effective against rock. Glaciers carve out massive land masses and push the earth and stone. Here's a good example of glaciers. In the United States, there's a place called Long Island. It's just to the right of New York City. Despite being surrounded entirely by natural waters, it's not an island. Some islands, like Hawaii and the other Hawaiian islands, are formed through tectonic plate movement. However, Long Island was created by a glacier that was growing and pushing sediment towards the south. Long Island is basically that last bit of rubbish you can't seem to sweep into your dustpan. The point of all this is that glaciers tore up not just the ground and the plants, but the rock as well. If you want another example of ice devastating rock, look no further than the roads people drive on. This is a diagram about how potholes form from Ottawa, Canada. When water seeps into cracks and freezes, it expands, which fractures and deforms the road. Once the ice melts, there is no support, so the road collapses into a pothole. Though one could argue that since it's a mix of water, ice, and car mass that destroys roads, it doesn't count as ice alone beating rock. People in favor of rock beating ice often cite the relationships between ice and salt. That used to be part of the reason I tolerated ice being weak to rock, but then I realized something. Salt does not actually melt ice. There is not a chemical reaction between the salt and the ice that generates heat to melt the ice, which is how I assumed it worked. When you salt roads and pavement, it is a preventative measure to prevent ice from forming at its usual freezing point of 0 degrees Celsius or 32 degrees Fahrenheit. Normally pure water will freeze into nice, neat, and compact ice crystals. If there are impurities like salt, the water will have difficulty arranging into a neat pattern of ice, so you'll require even lower temperatures to freeze the water. Even then, not all rock types are a type of salt. Only the Garganical line is so far. Rock doesn't beat ice. At worst it loses, and at best it's even. I don't feel like nerfing rock with an ice weakness because rock is already pretty bad defensively. So let's compromise. Ice is no longer weak to rock. Ice and rock are neutral against each other. And if you really don't like this change, I'll throw you a bone and buff Garganical's signature move, Salt Cure, to do bigger chip damage to ice, just like it does for water and steel. Not because it's fair or anything, but just because I like Garganical. It's Donkey Kong trapped in a pyramid. Or maybe this tangent is to distract you from the stealth rock weakness I'm removing from ice. As for the fighting type, while I'm not happy about the fighting weakness, I can't think of a fair enough reason to take it away instead of the rock weakness. This is from the thematic angle and the balance angle, by the way. Fighting's identity is really strange. Sometimes fighting is seen as the brute force or super strength type. Raw power and raw force can still damage rock, steel, and ice, despite them being hard substances. When we see bodybuilders and martial artists showing off their physical strength, they use hard objects like wood, bricks, ice, and metals to prove their strength. Fighting can also be seen as the type of justice and honor, hence why it's super effective against the dark type. In Japanese, dark is called the evil type, with the context of being wicked as opposed to dark Pokémon being pure evil. Fighting is resisted by Bug and Fairy for similar reasons of justice. Many martial arts are about self-defense, mindfulness, honor, protecting the weak, and avoiding the misuse of power. They have the strength to destroy durable, lifeless objects, but avoid using it on small, weak, living things. Arguably, fighting should resist ice given that some martial artists train outside in the cold weather, or even go as far as meditating under cold waterfalls to increase mental fortitude. The best example is probably wrestler John Cena, destroying his Bean Cheating and resisting brain freeze. Fighting is fine how it is. We should be grateful that fighting doesn't also resist ice, and that they don't get a free switch in on ice moves. So let's summarize all the changes we made to ice. We gave ice 3 new resistances and removed 1 weakness. Ice now resists electric, ground, and water. These typings are strong types that already hit a ton of important types super effectively or neutrally, so it's not devastating for them if ice resisted them. Ground was already weak to ice, electric keeps its neutrality to ice, and water gets to keep its resistance to ice. Ice is no longer weak to rock, and rock maintains its neutrality to ice moves. Now what can we expect from these changes? Ice types generally will have a more reasonable time switching in now that their ice typing offers some key resistances. For single battles, their ice typing no longer adds a weakness to stealth rock. Ice will also be the only solo type resistant to the bolt beam combo. In double battles, they can actually use their resistances to take more muddy waters, surfs, earthquakes, discharges, and other water, ground, or electric spread moves. Even though ice types still don't resist flying, grass, or dragon, ice types still can threaten them with super effective stab ice moves. I also went through every ice type combination, and the trend is pretty interesting. Obviously, all dual types get better because ice actually brings more resistances and less weaknesses now. More interestingly, There's a bunch of typings that still stay weak to a ton of types, but gain a ton more resistances. For example, remember Crabominable's 6 weaknesses from the last video? Those don't change at all. It's still weak to fighting, flying, steel, fire, psychic, and fairy. However, it has 7 resistances total, resisting bug, ice, dark, ground, rock, water, and electric now. I don't think I've ever seen such boom or bust weaknesses and resistances before. It's not ideal, but it's interesting. As is the case with other dual types, some dual type synergies just don't work out defensively. I'm going to make a separate video where I go over all the dual type changes. This video is already too long, and that process made me realize I want to rework some other weaker types like grass, bug, and rock first. Thanks for listening to yet another ice type rant. I just didn't realize I had so much to say. I was also hoping to find the right middle ground between people who play Pokemon casually, competitive players, Nuzlockers, people who do other challenge runs, even people who don't play Pokemon at all. It seems like I've been doing well so far with that, and I'm glad about that. Thank you all so much for your support, and keep asking questions. I'm happy to answer them. I'll see you all next time. Later.